Hi, I'm Jim Helsinger, Artistic Director at Orlando Shakes, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to our live-streamed Q&A with the cast and the creative team of the National New Play Network rolling world premiere of My Lord, What a Night. Feel free to leave your questions about the production in the comments and in the chat, and we'll try to answer as many of them as we can. To get us started tonight, we want to take a short preview of our video-on-demand production of My Lord, What a Night by Deborah Brevoort. So take it away with the preview.
Don't miss this new world premiere play based on a true friendship between two historic icons, scientist Albert Einstein and opera singer Marion Anderson.
The American press feels compelled to hound me wherever I go.
You're a very famous man.
But I'm a scientist that they don't understand and a Jew that they don't like.
I'm an average colored woman. Nobody pays attention when injustice happens to people like me. They do pay attention when it happens to people like you.
Your protest yesterday in Washington has unleashed a wave of negative publicity.
That always happens when there's a protest, Miss Anderson. You can't let it stop you.
Conservative newspapers are now stoking fears that I will use my tour to launch a Negro assault against whites. I don't think you're a clod at all, Mr. Flexner. I think that what you're doing is admirable.
It's the most effective way I know of helping to save the Jewish race in Europe.
Just as singing is the most effective way I know of helping the Negro.
Witness history in the world premiere of Deborah Brevoort's My Lord, What a Night. Tickets to this video-on-demand performance available now at orlandoshakes.org.
I want to welcome our guests for this evening. First of all, our playwright Deborah Brevoort is with us today.
Hi, it's great to be here.
Welcome, Deborah. We also have our scenic and lighting designer, Stephen Jones, with us. Nice to have you, Stephen. And two of our leading actors, Cheryl Carbonell, who plays Marion Anderson.
Hi, I'm glad to be here too.
And Eric Zivit, who plays Albert Einstein.
Hi, everybody.
So we want to hear your questions. I'm going to start with a few for our audience, but leave questions for our guests in the comments, and we'll see them and we'll get to them. So I kind of want to start, Deborah, with what was the original inspiration and development of the piece?
Sure. A couple of years ago, Premier Stages in New Jersey announced a commission program with the Liberty Museum in Union, New Jersey, where they wanted to commission a play that dramatized some historical event that took place in New Jersey. And they listed a bunch of topics. They said they'd like something in Princeton, and they had and Marion Anderson was on this list. Well, when I was 7 years old, my mother gave me Marion Anderson's autobiography, My Lord, What a Morning, to read. And it was one of those books that as a kid I just loved. And when I saw this commission opportunity, I thought, oh, I would love to read that book again because it was such a special book. And so I dove in and I reread it, and I discovered this event that happened in Princeton in 1937 when Marion Anderson, who was coming off of a world tour where she was performing for the crowned heads of Europe, and she was one of the most famous singers in the world, comes to Princeton, New Jersey, gives a concert, and goes to the Nassau Inn after the concert where her manager had booked her a room, only to find that she's thrown out into the street and not given a room because she's Black. And Albert Einstein, who was basically president of her fan club, happened to be there. He was fanboying her, walking her back to the hotel. And thank God for that, because when they kicked her out of the hotel, he took her back home and gave her a place to stay. And this began a lifelong friendship that continued until their deaths. And she stayed with him often. And so the inspiration for the play comes from having known Marion Anderson, having read her autobiography as a child, and this incredibly provocative incident which I then dramatized and put into a one-act play that was basically a museum installation. And I'll wrap up so other people can talk. But while I was sitting in rehearsals for that play, I realized that the events of 1937 were simply prelude to the events of 1939, the events that happened 2 years later, where Marion Anderson, who had never been able to perform for a large audience in Washington, D.C., is trying to do a concert for the students at Howard University, and tries to book Constitution Hall, and the Daughters of the American Revolution deny her the right to sing. And that event became a nationwide controversy. It very much paralleled the event in 1937 at the hotel, although it was certainly of a larger scale. And that eventually led to her performance at the Lincoln Memorial, which historians now, recognize as the starting bell for the civil rights movement. And it turns out to be one of the most significant events in history. In fact, Marion Anderson and the Lincoln Memorial will be on the back of the new $5 bill now that, the currency is going to be revised. And the reason it's significant is that she established the Lincoln Memorial as the symbol of civil protest in the United States. And that is the symbol that has endured to this day. So this concert was not only started the civil rights movement, or was the starting bell, I guess you could say, but became symbolically very important.
Stephen, I'm going to move on to you next. So the play takes place in Einstein's house. And what was it like to try to create that for our audiences originally in our smaller Goldman Theater, which seats 125, and now it's become a video thing that can seat thousands and thousands. But tell us a little bit about getting into the lives of Einstein and Marion Anderson and putting it on the stage.
That's a great question. This was a particularly fun challenge as a scenic designer, and because there is so much historical realism that allows me to really be a dramaturg and a historian in terms of what the floor plan of Einstein's home was. Some fun facts to learn about this cottage style architecture that actually was created and selected from a catalog, which is a really fascinating thing to think about when you put it into the context of time. But learning about what that floor plan was like, going into the history books to discover those things. I really nerd out on architecture anyway, so this was right up my alley. But then also discovering the decor, learning about the color palette, the learning about those little knickknacks and objects of art that might be scattered around Einstein's home, really took me down a wonderful rabbit hole of researching images of Einstein, static images that we all have seen before, of Einstein sitting in his chair with a bookshelf behind him. Well, really scouring what was in those bookshelves. Why was that in the bookshelves? And then also I'll conclude by saying, figuring out simple things that Deborah actually laid out brilliantly in the script. As a scenic designer, sometimes we take for granted how a character moves on stage and what those motivations are. Where would Einstein place the tea? Right, is one of those things that is fun to research. What is the ritual of making tea? What kind of tea? All those different types of things were fantastic research opportunities for me. I loved it.
So moving on, Cheryl, can you tell us a little bit about playing Marion Anderson?
Sure. It was both a thrill and a scare. She's not, in my opinion, well documented on camera. I've seen speaking and just in her just talking, and I've seen several clips of her singing and with that gorgeous voice of hers. I'll talk about that in a second. But I watched over and over again a clip of her on What's my line, the game. And I learned a lot about her because I wanted to know what she talked, what register did she speak? And she spoke kind of in an upper register, even though she has this like rich, deepish kind of voice, not deep, but anyway, it's not what I expected. And so I'm glad I looked at that and I watched her mannerisms and what she thought was funny, how she joked. I found myself watching a lot of period shows and really realizing how modern women today, we sit and speak and do things so differently. So it took some practice for me to sit the way I think she would sit and to speak the way I think she would speak. That being said, I tried not to emulate her or copy her. I tried to bring what I thought, given the parameters of what we know, but I tried to put myself in her shoes rather than copy her, because I feel like if I did that, first of all, it wouldn't be truthful. And secondly, I would never do her justice if I did that. And I did the same vocally. I thought, oh, wow, she has this really distinct quality, vocal quality that I would not even attempt to copy. So I simply tried to sing using my voice, but using phrasing and some of her mannerisms, I guess you would say, when she sang. She sang a lot with her eyes closed, but so we kind of mixed that up, in the process. But, shows all the way up to Mrs. America. I know that was much later, but it was very interesting to see that a lot of what she struggled with in her time period was still going on then, still going on now. But it also helped me just to watch the culture of women and to kind of imagine what she encountered when she was turned away by certain people, but by the DAR, by groups of women who maybe thought differently thought differently about women of color. So to sum that up, it was thrilling. It was quite an honor. I read her book, her autobiography, and that was an experience. I read it and reread it, and it just broke my heart that a Black family living in Jim Crow America in the 1930s would lose the breadwinner. She was raised by a single mother. She was one of three girls, and that just hurts me so much when people have so much against them anyway. And then but she fought with her voice, and that is what I took away from that. I took that quite seriously and applied that to my own life. I think it's okay for us to use our voice, literally and figuratively, in the way that we were meant to use it. So
Eric, welcome back. I think we lost you for just a second, but it's a thrill to see your face again. So you're playing a very famous person, Albert Einstein. What were the the fun and the challenges in taking that on?
For me, it was both fun and challenging all at the same time. I have an unusual personal connection to Einstein. My father is an expert in Einstein's lesser theory of relativity, published on this theory, and I grew up having my dad trying to explain quantum mechanics to me, 9, 10, 11, 12 years old. My younger brother was smart enough to understand the math. I was not. But what I was profoundly affected by, was the excitement that I always heard in my father's voice when he was talking about Einstein. And I thought, wow, who is this guy? How does he have this effect on my stoic dad? And so I as a teenager, I began to scour the various libraries in my hometown in Canada for whatever kind of information there was about this man, and years literally decades later now, and I'm thinking. Like everybody knows Einstein or thinks they know Einstein, and I wanted my Einstein to be a man that audiences could attach themselves to, could come away and think, what I think I understood about Einstein, being a good guy, I just saw that good guy. That was really, really important to me. He was critically important to supporting, often behind the scenes, the nascent civil rights movement in this country. He was a conduit for critically important scientific information that was being secreted out of Europe in advance of World War II and getting it to the American authorities. And all the while, he had this public, almost clown-like, caricature-like. At the end of his life, he himself sort of often said, I've become a caricature of myself. But before that happened, he was just a very bright guy who wanted to do good in the world.
I do want to loop back, Eric, in just a moment. I see a question's popped up from the audience.
Yeah, sure.
To while Marion Anderson is struggling with the DAR and the Lincoln Memorial, Einstein is going through his own difficulty trying to write and get a letter to the president. The question we have is a typical film and the number of shots. And I think audiences probably have some questions about how did we move this from stage to film? So I can answer a little bit of that. We filmed over about a 2-week period. We tended to film in about 4-minute hunks, and we did 178 takes. Our goal was to have a good take and a fair take, 2 good takes if we could, from each moment. You can see here, this was from the center camera. It was a 3-camera shoot. And if Christian, you'll give me, it's not in this one, but we also had to stay 6 feet apart under almost all circumstances. So here's one of me doing 6 feet between Einstein and Flexner. And as you can see, they're all wearing their masks. So everybody wore their mask under social distancing until we actually filmed. And then when we were filming, they had to stay 6 feet apart. Or if there were a couple situations where, and you'll see when you watch the play, where they got closer, but they could not speak because you don't want the particles coming out for COVID. So that basically came down to 3 times. And I don't know, I'll let you guys talk about it, Cheryl and Eric, but we had to take people's coats because Einstein's a very nice guy. We had to serve tea, and we had to share chocolates. So if either of you kind of want to, how did we do that? It was an interesting story, I think. So go ahead, Cheryl.
Well, we color coded the chocolates, who would take which color. And I figured out which ones were the dark chocolates, which are my favorite. So I had those. And it got to a point where we were eating so much chocolate. I started saving, biting pieces and saving them. And the staff was good. They were like, where's that chocolate? We want to make sure. I got a few texts that it was scooped up and put away, that no one was retouch it, but don't worry, I saved it for myself. Only I touched my chocolate.
So one of our things was Einstein has to serve chocolates to Marion Anderson, but they could never touch the same thing. So they were individually wrapped. Were you blue or red? I'm trying to remember.
I think it was red was the dark chocolate.
I think you were red, and Einstein had on the other side of the chocolate box blue ones, so they never touched the same chocolate. And then you want to tell us about tea or coats, Eric?
It's funny and odd, to have been raised, with those same kinds of manners, and then to suddenly find yourself like knowing what to do physically, but there's this now sort of hard and fast rule about how human that experience can be. And I can only speak for myself. I don't know what this experience was like for Cheryl, but I found myself, that little critic in the back of your head saying, "Oh, no one's going to buy this," that I'm just, silently crossing the space to take her coat off. And then we see how it's cut together, and it was amazing. How seamless that those kinds of moments are made, and it's really, I think, a credit. I mean, I'm the guy who's doing most of the moving around, but it's really a credit to my scene partners in all of those moments. To be still and brave and present, all of that at the same time. That's really hard work. And
yeah, I think
everybody made it look easy.
One of the advantages that we had being socially distant within a film, as you were saying, Eric, is you could go to take the coat, and then while you're hanging the coat up, we could cut to a shot of somebody else and then come back, and it didn't feel like a dead spot. I don't feel like there are any dead spots. I'm going to finish answering Jarrett's question here real quick, just to geeky-wise. So we did a 3-camera shoot, all Canon cameras, all the same. That went into what's called an ATEM switcher, where we could choose between the 3-camera shots that we wanted. We then took all that raw footage, what was a basic rough cut. We then took that into Premiere Pro, and in Premiere Pro, then we used what's called multicam shooting to be able to choose when we were moving which camera where. Then we had insert shots that we put in when we wanted to go back and catch something a little bit differently. In particular, when we paraphrased Deborah's words and we wanted to go back and correct it. And Deborah, there are still paraphrases in there. We didn't fix them all. Sort of in how it was done. We have another question. Deborah, you've written about real people before, The Woman of Lockerbie, and your piece that played at Orlando Playfest about the space program at Cape Canaveral. What are the joys and challenges of writing about historical? That was the History Boys? No, I'm not sorry.
The Blue Sky Boys, about the engineers that got us to the moon. So thank you, Beth Links, for that question. That's a great question. So there's all kinds of challenges. And I guess the way that I always approach it, anything that's historical is that I look for the blank spaces or the empty spaces. I am not interested in documentary theater. In fact, as a playwright, I'm personally opposed to it. I know I'm alone in this. I'm like, leave that to the documentarians. So I always look for the blank space, the event where there's that, in other words, that leaves room for the imagination, that leaves room for me to imagine what happened. In this case, we know Marion Anderson was kicked out of the Nassau Inn. We know she was not allowed to perform at Constitution Hall, but we don't know what happened that night when she went home with Einstein and what those backroom conversations were. So there was a space for me to imagine. But ultimately, when you're working with history, there's something that happens, and that is that the need for historical accuracy almost 100% of the time bumps up against the needs of the drama. And in order to fulfill the needs of the drama, you often always have to alter history in some way. in order to get at a deeper truth. So you have to rearrange the objective facts because the needs of history are different than the needs of drama. Now, what was so, and for me as a playwright, I always come down on the sides of what does the story need? What does the drama need? And how can I be true to some deeper truth as opposed to the objective truth? And plus the whole objective truth is people argue about that anyway. So what is it, right? But but what was very interesting about this story, because I've done a lot of historical work actually, was that the events of this play, like for example, what happens in Act 2, when Einstein is given the information about the ability to make an atomic bomb, and when Marion Anderson is like right at the crux of the crisis over the Lincoln Memorial, and when Abraham Flexner is presented with his crisis at Princeton, where he ends up leaving the university, and where Mary Church Terrell, all of those events in history happened within 1 6-week period. Now, it's almost so elegant that it feels fake. You know what I mean? So in this case, I didn't really have to invent that much. I mean, I invented what happened in that room, but the events of history actually accommodated the needs of drama. That has never happened to me before, except in this play. And I was also extremely lucky that I had 4 characters who, 3 of whom had written books. Mary Church Terrell wrote an autobiography. Marion Anderson did too. Flexner has written one. He wrote many things. Einstein did not write an autobiography, but he was the most verbal person on earth. I mean, he never stopped talking. He was a chatterbox. And so I had all of their language, and I had their words and what they said. And so, you know, obviously I adapted what they said, but a lot of what you're going to hear tonight in the play comes from them. You know, altered, trimmed, edited a little bit, but it's them. It's their voice. So that was like one of the particular joys of working on this production.
Great. I'm going to do the speed round now because we only have about 2 minutes. If you could tell your best friend who was going to see the show one thing that was either, I don't know, interesting or backstage or something, what would that be? I'll do one real quick, which is, as you watch the show, there's plenty of tea. No one ever actually drinks the tea because this was a problem under COVID. You'll see us smell it, but watch to see if we ever actually drink any tea. Somebody else go.
I'll go. I guess the thing that I would love the audience to keep in mind as they're watching is that whenever we protest today, whether we go to the Women's March with our pink pussy hats, whether we go for whatever political persuasion you are, we in America go to the Mall of Washington and we go to the Lincoln Memorial to protest. And the reason we do that is because of Marion Anderson. She created the Mall of Washington and the Lincoln Memorial as the symbol of civil protest in America. It's a tradition that continues to this day, but it's a tradition that we have forgotten. We don't know that it comes from her. And so tonight, when you see the play, you will see the event that spawned this thing that we all participate in today.
Excellent. Excellent. Anybody else?
That if a Black woman in 1939 can have a platonic friendship with a white male against the backdrop of Nazi Germany and Jim Crow America, we can overcome all these differences and we can overcome all of this. You know, they had that friendship during a time where that was not couth, not allowed. So we can overcome. We can.
Great.
The play is full of literally world famous people, and yet their concerns, their questions, their desires to do good are all at a very human level.
Sweet.
And I just say, oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, you're up, Stephen. Go ahead.
I would just say, you know, this is a part of our history as a country, and it's a beautiful thing to celebrate and to enjoy, and it's a piece of theater at the same time. What else can you ask for?
I think those are great notes for us to finish on, and we're all going to watch the play now. and then have an opening night Zoom party, because we can't really actually have an opening night party. And I hope that all of you watch it, if not now, very soon, and enjoy this very special play. I should end with a shout out to the National New Play Network. This is a rolling world premiere of the National New Play Network, and that organization is fantastic. We are proud members, and we're thrilled to be sharing this play with other theaters. There are 2 other theaters, probably more now, all committed to doing the show whenever they can when the pandemic will let them. So I want to say thank you to everybody for joining us and on the Facebook chat, and we'll look forward to seeing you all live in a theater fairly soon.
Great. Thanks. Enjoy.
Thank you, everybody.